Fair News.
Right now, policymakers and scientists from all over the world are meeting at the G8 International Conference on Open Data for Agriculture in Washington, D.C. They're talking about agriculture data, how to share it, how to use it, and how it might address global food security. Here to talk about what that means and why it matters here in Arizona are Dr. Shane Burgess, Dean of the University of Arizona College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Dr. Eric Lyons, an assistant professor in the University of Arizona School of Plant Sciences, and Leona Davis, education and advocacy coordinator for the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona. Well, thanks to all three of you for coming in today and talking about this important topic. Let's start with you, Shane. Now, so this G8 conference that's going on, can you just give us a little sense of what it's really about and what you think is most interesting about it?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are interesting about it, but of course, first of all, the G8 countries are the major industrialized countries in the world. And these are the countries that have the most wealth in the world, have invested most in agricultural research, and that's research writ large. It might be molecular biology of plants, it might be understanding our weather systems, and these countries all have a lot of data. And the suggestion is, and it's happening all over the world, not just in agriculture, that if we make our data more accessible, more available, we'll be able to make more use of the data and leverage the investments that have gone into this data for the greater use of everybody.
And when I think about food security, I think most of us think about that as somewhere other than here. You know, oh no, surely we're secure in our food here in the US, but maybe not so much?
Mm-hmm. Certainly when we talk about food insecurity, we're not just talking about the global context, but also here in the US and especially here in Southern Arizona and Pima County. We've seen here at the Community Food Bank our client numbers double in the last 6 years, and that rate of increase pretty much exactly parallels the rise of unemployment in Southern Arizona. So as we all know, we've been in a tough economic times in recent years, and food insecurity, the lack of access to sufficient healthy food, is absolutely one and the same as being impoverished.
And in that context, we're talking about people being able to buy food in the store or something. We're not necessarily talking about our local agricultural systems, or are you talking about that as well?
It's absolutely both. It's access to food at the grocery store and the ability for a region to produce food. So again, here in Southern Arizona, we do have local and regional agriculture, and we've seen a rise in urban agriculture and regional agriculture, small farms, just in recent years because of a new awareness of food security issues.
And Eric, so one of the things that you're involved in is a program called iPlant. So tell us a little about that, because I understand it has something absolutely to do with what's going on at the G8 conference.
Yes, so the iPlant Collaborative is a large national investment in building cyber infrastructure for, at first, the plant science community, and now more generally, non-medically related life science community. And so when we talk about big data, lots of data, sharing data, dealing with maybe the entire life cycle of data, we need a lot of infrastructure to help make that happen. And what that's known as is cyber infrastructure. So this includes all of the computer resources, data storage, data management, and really important to the entire process, knowledge on how to use all of these systems. So what we've seen happen on an individual basis is a lot of us have become a lot more connected in terms of all having, or majority of people having a lot of access to the internet, either from our home computers or at a library or from a cell phone. And now what we want to do is make sure that that same kind of technology is helping us deliver global solutions to global problems, such as food security across the entire world.
Interesting. So at this G8 conference, they're talking about leveraging this kind of infrastructure and moving that into places like Africa and that kind of thing. Is that?
Well, the conference, as I should have said this before, the conference is, at least the initial G8 meeting that led to this conference, is focused on Africa. But we now live in a globally interconnected food system. And so not only will the outcomes of this meeting be helping those countries that are developing, it'll also help us because it's going to drive a rising middle class, more people who can build their standard of living in these other countries, which are major sources of export income for Arizona, which will then feed back into Arizona's economy and hopefully decrease the need for the community food bank.
So in terms of cell phones and the different kinds of infrastructure, I mean, are cell phones actually part of this infrastructure that's
Yes.
going to provide data? I mean, I know that farmers already are using them, for instance, in India.
Yes, and I would have to say, so one of the programs that iPlant is involved with is a collaboration with the Gates Foundation, specifically with what's known as the Generation Challenge. And one of the projects they're developing is known as the Integrative Breeding Platform, which is basically an entire system that helps local farmers connect their data with those that are happening at agricultural research centers around the world to basic research scientists that are trying to improve germplasm or determining what kinds of seeds are going to do well in a particular kind of environment. And so when we go to a lot of developing nations, having good cyber infrastructure may not be there in terms of having landlines going to everyone's personal residence. But everyone now, or a very vast majority of people, have cell phones. And what this does is gives you the same degree of access in terms of accessibility, but maybe not necessarily in terms of being able to move a huge amount of data. So what's important about having these devices, it lets people go out there, record things, digitally capture it, and then be able to add that to a global pool of information that can be mined in the future for determining what's going to work best in different local environments.
Leona, how do you see this all impacting locally here?
Well, it's very exciting to see the international conversation around food security, because certainly international and national policy has a large effect on our region's food security here. However, it's also good to take into account our specific uniquities of our region, which we are in a border region of the United States, which means we actually have, for instance, challenges like lower household incomes, but also specific unique benefits like Nogales being one of the largest ports of entry of produce into the United States.
And what do you guys all think about how your work impacts locally here?
Well, I think, again, it's a big interconnected web, and so you talked about cell phones. So cell phones can not only be used to analyse data, work out what kinds of seeds, but also work out where the market's going. Where can we best get, where can we best sell our products to gain the most value for our families? How can we work in the labour markets? And these things are all very important to us locally. But also, how can we best identify labour sources in Arizona, which is going to, or where the jobs may be for local movement of people.
And the University, sorry, you were going to say something.
I really like that idea of being able to sort of interconnect a lot of the technologies or software systems we might be developing in developing countries, and then being able to apply them to these new kinds of ideas here. For example, local label markets, which I think are something that is a concern to a lot of farmers. And one of the things that you were mentioning is in terms of being able to connect to the local community, again, it would be great to be able to empower school children, kids, with these kinds of technology, because a lot of them are running around with cell phones. So there are these interesting tangential projects where people are becoming much more engaged in what we call citizen science. So being able to go out there and maybe catalog the natural diversity in terms of what's out there. But you can imagine moving that same technology to documenting, where does my food come from? So one of the questions I wanted to ask was, in terms of being able to do things on a local scale, how much more can we do to engage our neighborhood in terms of asking them that question of, where does my food come from?
Yeah, well, that's a really fascinating idea, both using the citizen science to really build up, support our local food system on a citizen scale. And so one of the things that makes us unique at the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona is that we do recognize food security is not an isolated issue. Hunger is not an isolated issue. It is intricately tied to the economy, to the local environment, to our community health, and even our relationships within a community. So food really touches every aspect of our lives. However, just a few things that the average person, doesn't matter what you do, how much money you make, could do to support our local food system. First, support the local economy, both buying local food, supporting local farmers, and non-food products as well, because that money that stays in the economy means creating and maintaining jobs, which means a lower rate of food insecurity. Secondly, environmental stewardship, and that can be as basic of home practices as energy and water conservation in the home. The land, healthy land is the building block of healthy food. And we have to remember as a region that the health of our land is absolutely the ability for us to have food security as a region. And then finally, meet your neighbors, which seems like maybe not related to something like food security, but it absolutely is. There's ample evidence that having relationships and strong social connections within a community means that, for example, say you meet a neighbor who is practicing urban agriculture, has a veggie garden and chickens, and might have a little extra to spare, and then you meet another elderly neighbor who hasn't identified themselves as food insecure for, say, social services or government services, but they're a shut-in and they absolutely are, and you're able to make those neighborhood scale connections, which means we're addressing food security in a much more efficient and effective way than even larger programs are able to do.
I was going to say, I think that's a really good example of what this is really all about fundamentally, and that's the transparency and access to data. And with transparency and access, you get much better communication, much greater links, much greater strengths in networks, whether they're community networks or worldwide networks. They just become part of the same continuum, part of the same scale. And of course, you drive innovation and entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
And at the University of Arizona, we've heard about the iPlant Collaborative that hasn't sprung from the university, I don't think, but at least is very involved in it. Oh, it did spring from the university.
The headquarters of the project is here in the University of Arizona.
Well, I'm so glad you set me straight. Sorry about that. I tried to give that to somebody else.
It was absolutely designed and developed in the college. Sure.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so what else are you guys doing in this area?
Everything in the entire continuum of how we feed and fuel society in the future. Everything, including things such as how we'll sell products in the future, how they impact our families' welfare, our families' health, how we work in local economies and in global economies, the kinds of plants we're going to grow, how we manage natural resources. That's what the college is all about.
So if we look into the future, presumably we're going to see some changes in the way our food is distributed and all of that. What do you see in the future?
One of the things locally, but it also applies on the national and international scale, is conservation of resources. So we have some very innovative farmers in southern Arizona who are working on water conservation as one of their main goals in their farming practices, for example.
And I would just sort of say to dovetail on that, one of the big things that I've been very impressed by at the University of Arizona and in conjunction with local farmers is how progressive they are in terms of adopting new kinds of technology in order to make better decisions about their farming practices. So in terms of this intersection of having a lot of data, big data and open data, it's the ability for people and farmers, for example, to be able to go out there and monitor everything there is about their field. So they can be getting satellite information. They can have a tractor that has a bunch of remote sensing technology on it, from being able to do GPS to understanding soil compositions in terms of what needs fertilizer, what has enough water, but also be able to use advanced technologies like LiDAR to be able to use lasers to scan for foliage to see what's growing, how fast it's growing, is there herbivory damage. And those kinds of research projects happen as a broad collaborative here in southern Arizona between the University of Arizona. We have a couple of USDA facilities in Maricopa, some here locally, as well as with all the farmers. And you probably can speak about this more than I can, the Extension Ag Center in Yuma as well, so that these are all working together.
So every state, many people don't know this, every state has something called the Cooperative Extension System. And there are many components to that, but the bottom line is we have a presence through the university, through Cooperative Extension, Arizona Cooperative Extension, in every single county. And these range from everything from people doing ag and natural resources, growing plants, teaching people how to harvest, identifying new equipment so we have better food safety, right through to helping families, the same kinds of families that Leona works with, helping their families with nutrition for their kids. And making sure there are some kids in Arizona that don't eat between Friday and Monday. It's a big deal for us in the college. I think it's a big deal for Arizona. If you're not eating between Friday and Monday, it makes it pretty hard to learn on Monday.
Yeah, no kidding.
So these are the kinds of things that we care about deeply. That's what drives all of our faculty. We have 1,600 employees in the college, and they all care about this, and they could all have a conversation about this with you. But as I said, our dissemination arm is Arizona Cooperative Extension. Again, most people haven't heard of this. Leona, of course, had heard of these folks and has probably worked with some of them, I guess.
Absolutely, we partner with Cooperative Extension.
Yeah. And so that's a big deal. I think, imagine a system if everyone's got a handheld technology. One of the problems we have with food security is it's not just availability and access, but it's nutritional content. Are we eating the right things that are good for us? Because, if we're not, then we're not going to really take advantage of what it means to be human. Our ability to use our brains to the full extent and solve our problems and solve these big issues that we face. And if we have proper nutrition, we can use our brains better. And that's a great thing for everybody.
You know, and to follow up a little bit on what you're saying, which I think comes back to the research that happens here at the University of Arizona, is this idea of being incredibly collaborative across boundaries between this College of Agricultural and Life Sciences to information technology systems to arts and sciences, and important to that, of course, are computer science. And so one of the things that's been very productive to see happen here is how easy it is to basically be able to coordinate a bunch of different kinds of basic research technologies and be able to move these and collaborate immediately with people that are applying these to real world problems out in the field. Very unique situation.
What's also exciting about that level of collaboration is then you get into the scale where you might be able to affect the policy level. We do have a food council in Pima County, and they part of what they do is work on policy. If we get into where we're using this technology, both from a citizen science and what you were talking about, using LiDAR and things like that to look at broader agricultural scale, that might be able to inform policymakers to then make decisions based on rewarding, say, good conservation practices or other strategies for the future.
Well, we have to leave it there, I'm afraid. But thank you so much to all three of you for coming in and talking with us about this today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. You can watch any of the segments again and add your own comments at azpm.org. I'm Jane Pointer. Thanks for joining us.